Hi, I am so glad you're here. I am Angela Pruce. I am a child and family counselor. I am the writer and creator at the website Parents with Confidence, and I am a mom to my own three kids, two of whom are spirited or strong-willed. So I help parents raising strong-willed, spirited kids develop more confidence in their parenting approach and more connection and cooperation in their relationship with their spirited child. So if this is you, if you are a parent that is raising a determined, outspoken, spirited child, you are in the right place today because we are going to be talking about something really, really important. We're going to be talking about 3 life-altering things that are at risk depending on the approach you use when you are raising your strong-willed child. So we will get to that in just a minute. So you've heard me talk a lot about just how different the parenting journey can be depending on the kind of child that you're raising and how this just isn't talked about very much in our culture. So depending on your child's characteristics, right? We classify these things as temperament and personality, right? These are the things that we know without a doubt are hardwired into human beings when they come into the world. And that's how we've classified them, is by, temperament characteristics and personality traits. Depending on these things and the combination of these things, your parenting journey will look completely different from someone else's. And I'm talking night and day. And if you are a parent who's watching that has one strong-willed, spirited kid, and maybe another who is not, who has a very different temperament, you are going to totally feel me on this and let me know in the comments below if this is you, and how old your kids are and just what your experience has been, because it's amazing to hear time after time from parents that will write in and say, there was one mom who had 5 kids. Actually, I think it was 6, 5 or 6 kids, anyhow, it doesn't matter. And the next kid that came along, her last kiddo, who there was a gap between, I think there was like an 8 or 9 year gap between her other youngest, and then her preschooler. And she said, man, I felt really confident with my other kids. I have no clue what to do with this one. It is a totally different ball game. So this is so true. And if we think about it, it really makes sense, right? It's the same thing as, how our child's, the early years can be so different and such a different experience depending on how a baby is and how they are responding and interacting with their world, right? I mean, I'm sure that we all know people, or you yourself have experienced that, the difference between having a baby who, is more even-tempered and sleeps more often, takes naps more often, goes back to bed more quickly, is easier to soothe, right? Those things then lead to a very different experience for the parent, right? The parent then can get more sleep. The parent then feels better and gets that positive reinforcement about what they're doing, right? In their caretaking. So they feel better about themselves, which then helps them to be their bucket to be full, so to speak, so that they can then pour back out to their child and gain that confidence. On the other hand, you have the parents who may have a colicky child, right? This was me with our second child, harder to soothe, and really it just completely changes your life. I'm not going to even try to say that it's not as dramatic as that, because it is, because you don't sleep. And we all know what happens when you don't sleep, right? There's usually some degree of sleeplessness with an infant, but not always. I know plenty of people whose babies slept through the night within a few weeks. My husband always said, "Oh, it makes me so mad when people's babies just sleep right away." I said, "You can't say that. It's not good energy to send out." But anyway, because our experience was never that, but especially with our second, she was just more challenging as an infant. So the less sleep you get, the more stressed you are, right? The less time you have for self-care and things that fill your bucket. And the more you're kind of feeling like, what am I doing wrong, right? Because as humans, we love to try to label things and find a reason. So of course, one of those reasons must be us, right? We must be doing something wrong. And then that affects the way that we show up with our child, and so on and so forth. So that can look so different depending on how the infant is interacting with their world. This does not stop when the child gets older, right? This continues on. So a child continues to have a specific combination of temperament and personality, and this greatly affects the parenting journey. So there is just no question. Some kids are different. And so our kids, our spirited kids, are going to need a different approach in many instances with parenting because they're just more complex kiddos because of their combination of characteristics. They're just more complicated and more complex. And so we will need a different approach. And the harsh reality is, it took me years and years to realize this. Maybe you are wiser than I and you have realized it already, or maybe you are kind of still in this space where you haven't yet realized it. But unfortunately, because some days, it just seems like it would be so much easier if we could control our child. But the harsh reality is you cannot control another human being fully. And nor really, when we say it out loud, it becomes kind of apparent that, well, yeah, we don't really want to, right? We want them to learn how to be autonomous and we want them to be independent. But, we expect that we're going to be able to control our child, right? That's what's in our little vision bubble that floats above our head before we have children. They're going to kind of follow us around like the mother duckling and the little babies behind her, right? So the reality is we cannot control our kids. Strong-willed kids show us this because they have a higher need for control and power, and they will not give it all away. They will not let you do it. And some kids will. I have a little baby duck that follows me around. He does whatever I ask him, usually in the first try. Every once in a blue moon, he'll give a little bit of resistance. He'll put up a little flag and be like, no, and then it's like one little redirection and boom, he's on it. So it's a totally different experience, and that has played out in my house. So this reality that we cannot control our child, it can be frustrating that things just don't seem to go easily sometimes when we need them to. However, I want to tell you today that there is something very positive, something that will hopefully help you to feel good and feel positive. You can't control your child, right? But what you can absolutely control to the high hills all day long is the environment that they're raised in. And this is where these three things that hang in the balance that we're going to talk about right now come into play, because the reality is the way that you do things with your child right now when they're young have a huge impact, not only on certain variables right now, but also on things in the future. So these are things that you have enormous power to control and you can impact in such a positive way. So these are things also that strong-willed kids are at risk for. So these things, really hang in the balance and depend on the way that we approach our kids and how we do things when we raise them. So the first thing that we'll talk about is, let's talk about right now. Well, no, I'm not going to do that. Just kidding. Rewind. So we're just going to go one at a time. So the first thing that is at risk when we are raising a strong-willed child is your parenting journey. So there are some things that make being a parent more challenging. If you're raising a strong-willed child, there's more complicated dynamics, right? You feel stress and overwhelm because often you're not sure how to go about disciplining or teaching your child and handling their challenging behaviors. You wonder, why do things have to be so hard all the time, right? You tried so many approaches to get your child to listen. It seems like nothing works consistently. They have strong emotions often. Oftentimes, strong-willed kids are also, highly sensitive and emotional kids. And so that can be really overwhelming to navigate. And then, of course, you feel guilty when you lose your cool with them, when they're having these big behaviors and you react harshly. And overall, that can really lead to family life just feeling heavy and stressful and really, not aligning with the expectations that you had, before you had kids. So when you have a child that is more complex like this, it really does impact your role as a parent. You start to, when you're dealing with more challenging behaviors throughout the day, you start to doubt yourself as a parent. You start to feel judged by others. And often we are judged by others, let's be honest. And you really can feel stuck in this cycle of irritation and resentment with your child. And family life feels overwhelming and can feel really stressful. And this really, really impacts this journey of parenthood. And when we're in it day to day, we get so caught up in it, it just becomes life and it becomes survival. But really, let's take a step back here and look at this, from a larger perspective. We get one shot at this parenthood thing, right? We get, 18 years with your child, give or take, of course, and how long they're at home or whatever. But, you have this period of time, and I'm certain that it's a role that you value above all else, right? This is the most important job that you'll ever have and that you want to do a good job with, right? You don't want to look back 20 years down the road and feel guilty about the way you approach certain things and wish you had done things differently, right? This is your journey of parenthood, and nobody else is responsible for how it plays out besides you, right? It's so easy to feel resentful towards our child and try to blame them. And it's, of course, how would I not be stressed out all the time? And how would I not be feeling frustrated with them and yelling at them all the time because they push my buttons and they test me and they, and we put all of our focus on them and we let their behaviors have all this power over us. And really, the reality is that we have to take responsibility for how we are going to, put forth our own energy and what we're going to do and the kind of parent that we're going to be. Because this is our one shot at parenthood. And, you certainly don't want to waste this precious short period of time you have as a parent stuck in a battle that you'll always regret. And I think you probably know someone or have been somebody who has experienced this, right? That there are so many relationships, parent-child relationships, that are damaged and are negative because parents and children who don't have good relationships anymore because of the negative dynamics that started in childhood. And we don't want that. Nobody wants that. So that is the first thing at risk, depending on how you raise and approach your strong-willed child now. The second thing is your child's emotional health and well-being. So these are things that will be hugely impacted by how you respond to and engage with your child right now, today, when you're raising them. So their future health and well-being and their future potential. So John Gottman, who was this really awesome therapist and researcher, came up with the 5-to-1 ratio through his extensive decades and decades of research. He basically discovered that in order to have a healthy, functional relationship, the relationship needs to have 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative interaction. So when I share this with parents raising strong-willed, spirited kiddos, often it gets a big reaction because all of a sudden it hits us, wow, how many positive interactions do we really have with our child throughout the day, right? It's just reality that your child elicits more negative feedback due to their challenging behaviors because they're more curious, right? Because they're more energetic, because they're more persistent and determined, right? And they may, if we look at all these other temperament characteristics, these are just going to cause them to bump into, kind of normal, what's been deemed as normal. Normal is not a great word. What have been deemed as typical, social constructs. These unique, awesome kids will bump up against these, more often, every day in the world. And because of that, they will get more negative feedback. So kids are expected to be quiet. They're expected to listen, right? They're expected not to say no, right? God forbid a child says no to an adult. All of those things will elicit negative feedback, and the language and the tone that your child hears and observes around them on a regular basis, those things matter. They do. Day after day, if a child is absorbing, all of this negative feedback and these negative facial expressions and negative tones of voice, of course, this is going to have a role in shaping, their perception, their self-identity, their confidence, and their self-esteem, right? And those things, self-esteem and self-confidence, predict life success, right? These are big, big things. And not only that, but they can contribute to, mental health conditions like anxiety and depression, because, we know that our thoughts, become emotions, and emotions become our actions. And those, the way we think about things and what we hear, the feedback that we hear from our environment and from those that love us, those things become internalized, and that becomes our child's inner voice, right? We know this. So those day-to-day interactions really do matter for your child's long-term self-esteem and confidence and emotional well-being. There's also something called negativity bias. You may have heard this before, that the human brain is just wired to pick up negativity more than positivity, which is why we have so much negativity around us in the media and everywhere, because it gets our attention, right? So this also enters the equation in parenthood, right? What gets your attention? How often are you giving your attention to? How often do you comment on, react to, respond to a positive behavior from your child? If they do something they're supposed to do, say they just do like a regular mundane thing, like brush their teeth without arguing, right? That's like a big thing, right? Sometimes for our kids, just do something when they're asked right away without having any resistance. They do this, and we probably aren't going to say anything because they're just supposed to do it, right? But you're darn sure you're going to comment when they're not doing what they need to do. When they're not, why can't you just do this? That brushing your teeth, you're 8 years old, by now you're going to get cavities, the routine. Why does this have to be so hard? Right? We're reacting and giving our energy and attention to the negative things so much more. And when we do this, we miss the positive things. And there are so many positive things about your strong-willed child, so many positive things, but when we have that lens on, and it's a negativity scanning lens, we're going to miss the beautiful positives that are there, right there looking at us. And if we don't put our energy into those, and we don't call attention to those and point them out, our child is not going to be aware of them, right? So it just takes more energy for you to be able to focus on their strengths. That's just the way that it is. So yes, and learning how to focus on their positive characteristics, because strong-willed characteristics are absolute strengths when you look at them differently through a different lens. So it's so important that we get this right and do the best that we can with this, because your child's emotional health and well-being definitely is directly impacted by those things. Okay, so our third and final area today that we're going to talk about that is at risk, depending on how you raise your strong-willed child, is your parent-child relationship. Interactions that you have now with your child will, without a doubt, shape your relationship for life with them. So the cycle of negativity with strong-willed kids, which you have heard me talk about before, and just really focusing on this negative behavioral loop, it really disconnects you from your child. It makes it really hard for you to move closer to them, right? Do you want to move closer to your child when they are in the midst of these challenging behaviors, or do you kind of want to move away when they're having big emotions? What is your gut instinct telling you to do? For most of us with big emotions and resistance, those types of things, we are wanting to move away, right? We haven't been told how to handle these things and how to respond to them and how to keep our cool. So we move away to protect ourselves, right? And that might mean sending him away, right? You need to go upstairs to your room. You need to go out of here. You need to go into a timeout because we can't tolerate it. So that cycle makes it so hard to connect, and it makes it really hard for your child to build a strong foundation of trust with you, because they need to know that you're going to be there through thick and thin, and their thick and thin is different than some other kids' thick and thin. And so you just need a different set of skills to be able to do that. And absolutely, trust and security are built in those primary years, right? It's no different than, how attachment develops for birth to 3. In those younger years, your child is looking to you as a safe place. They're looking for unconditional acceptance, and they're looking for, do they see me, who I am, and do they accept me and who I am? Do they want to change me? Do they wish I was different? Do they wish I wasn't as outspoken? And, a number of other things, right? Also, resenting your child is really toxic to your relationship. The more you get stuck in this thought loop about, kind of feeling like a victim, it is hard. It is hard. I have been there. I am walking this journey with you, and I know, excuse me, that it is not easy. It can feel really challenging and isolating. However, getting stuck there and living in that space, living in that little space of resentment, and frustration and blame, is just toxic for you and for your relationship. So connection is the foundation. Your relationship provides that primary source of connection for your child, and connection is the foundation for everything important for your child. It's the foundation for their mental health, for their future relationships, right? And then for right now, today, their cooperation and their listening is all balanced on that as well, and their confidence, how they feel about themselves. So those are the 3 hugely important things that hang in the balance of how you approach your strong-willed child. And I hope that it was helpful for you, and I hope that you were able to just shift your lens a little bit and how you look at some of those things, and just realize how important it is, that you approach them in a way that you can contribute so positively to their future well-being. And while we may not be able to control our child, and that feels frustrating, humans like to control everything in general, anything we can, really, and especially our kids. We're very much programmed to believe that they should be these objects that we can control. Once we accept that we can't control them, and weirdly we don't want to, that's not really a healthy way to raise an independent human being. We can control the environment that they're raised in, and there's so much space then for possibility there. So thank you so much for joining me today. I am so glad that you were here. Let me know what your biggest takeaway was in the comments, and I will see you soon. Thanks so much.